Today, I'm going to present you something that Emma already talked about, Zoneless in Angular applications. So just to present myself, I'm Matt. Some of you know me under my nickname on the internet, Jean-Mesh. And I'm part of the team as an open source contributor. And today, I want to present you Zoneless. And I can announce you today that Angular.dev is now a zoneless application. Thank you very much. This was my presentation. No. So what are we talking about? What is zoneless? So when we talk about zoneless, we ask a question of when. When does change detection happen? In Angular, and up till now, we used Zone.js as a scheduler to schedule change detection. When I say scheduling change detection is determining when the framework should call application ref.tick. So it's something that you will not call yourself. It's something that the framework does for you to just refresh the view on your browser. So whenever it needs to do it, Angular will call the tick for you. So the question is, when do you call that? So what Zone.js does, is mostly monkey patching a lot of browser APIs to just know when something asynchronous is happening. For example, a promise, a set timer, a set interval, a micro task, or whenever you listen to some events. So Zone.js patches those APIs to know when you are calling them and when something's happening. Okay, Zone.js knows, schedule some change detection. But there is a lot of problems depending on using Zone.js. What are the downsides? First, when you use Zone.js, you have 30 kilobytes of JavaScript that's eagerly loaded, and you cannot lazy load it. So something that will impact your bundle at the beginning. Second, with Zone.js, you introduce a concept of zones. So it's a runtime context that will, how can you say that? It's a runtime context that will help the browser understand, let's say, when the API are patched and when they're not. So if you are in a zone, let's say when you are in the Angular zone, you know that your change detection will be scheduled, and when you're outside of it, it won't do any change detection schedule. Third downside of using Zone.js is when you do some debugging, you will see you have a messy stack trace. You've got sometimes 10, 15, 20 calls of just Zone.js stacks in the stack trace. And it makes debugging a bit hard. And the last point, and not the least, is when you have Zone.js, you cannot have native async await. So, but you're wondering, you already use async await in your application. But what you probably don't know is that the CLI today just changes all the native async await in your code and does some down leveling using Babel to transform every async await into generators. So it transforms async await basically into then, which can be patched by Zone.js. So these are the major downsides of using Zone.js. And this is why the Angular team has been thinking of how could we drop Zone.js and how is it possible to do some scheduling without all these things. So how do we do this without Zone.js? So the question of when is the question of when is Angular had to introduce some new scheduler. So before we had Zone.js, now we need to introduce something new. And basically, the new scheduler is something that is plugged onto two browser APIs, set timeout, and the request animation frame. So whenever the framework will tell to the scheduler, hey, something changed, he will use those two APIs to just prepare some change detection. But how do you trigger, how do you call this new scheduler? First, like Emma said, Zoneless is an experimental API. So when you want to set up the new scheduler and replace the zone-based one, you will have to call this new function into the providers when you initialize your application, and also, of course, remove zone.js. So how will the framework know that something happened in your application? How does it know that it will need to schedule the changes? Well, the first answer is you can already do this, and the framework already knows that something happened when you were using observables with the async pipe. When you did that, behind the scene, the async pipe called the same method as mark for check. So it's telling the framework, okay, here this view is now dirty, please make it ready for change detection, even in context of an on-push component. So you can do Zoneless with only observables. But it's something new that has been introduced in V16, which are the signals. Signals is a second possibility to go zoneless with your applications. Either when you will be updating your signal with a set on an update, you will actually tell the framework, hey, my data has changed, please schedule something for me. So you're telling the framework, okay, the data changed, and the framework will say, okay, I will handle the change for you and refresh your application. So these are the two ways that you will be able to go zoneless in your application. And the third one that is also already in the framework is every time you call an event via the event listeners, so with the braces, it will also call for you the scheduler, so the change detection in the application. So basically, if you want to go zoneless today, those are the two ways you're going to be able to do it. The third one I don't want to mention is calling manually every time a Mac for check, which you do not want to do because in terms of DX, it's really not that great. In terms of DX, the team will recommend. When I say recommend, it's what you will prefer yourself going with signals. You have the signals, it's your data. Every time you update it, you're telling the framework, okay, the data has been updated, the view is dirty, please check it. But already today, if you have existing apps, performant apps that already exist, you probably use already the observables with the async pipe. You do not need to move to signals to go zoneless. You can keep your application that's already great, that's using observables, using the sync pipe, and you can go zoneless with it. If you're fully observable with sync pipe, if you use on push, you can probably already go zoneless with it. When I say probably, is it can depend also on the libraries you're using. You might not know that some libraries do not support zoneless. Before V18, for example, Matthieu was not zoneless compatible, but now it is. So these are the basics you need to know. And with this, you already see that it's not possible to have a migration that says, okay, take my application and make it zoneless in an update. This is complicated because you need to have either one of them, and these migrations are not, let's say it's complicated to have an automatic migration. So either you're already in the situation where you have a lot of observables, you're ready, you're writing probably a new application, you already use signals since V16, you're probably ready also. But if you're not there, then probably zoneless is going to require you a lot of refactoring work to go there. But there is something that we need to understand and to need to know, that Zone.js is not only a scheduler for Angular. It's more than that. And the second topic I want to talk today is a question of stability. What do we call stability in terms of the application? So your application, when something is, let's say, asynchronous, we knew that with Zone.js something was pending. You had either on ngZone or on application ref, you could call unstable. That will tell you if the application is stable or not. So if something is pending, it will return false for stable. Stability is some sort of global state that will tell you, okay, is my application waiting for something or not? And this is particularly important in the context of either server-side rendering, but also when you're doing pre-rendering. Basically, server-side rendering waits for your application to go stable the first time, and once it goes stable, say, okay, it was stable for the first time, I'm able to ship the HTML to the client. So the first time it goes stable, it will send the HTML to the client. And this is why it's important that we know what is happening in the application. Is it stable or not? But also, if you have been building components libraries, for example, you sometimes have to do some DOM operations. And often you want to wait that everything is done, and when your application is stable, you want to update the DOM and say, okay, I know nothing is pending, please do initialize, imagine some library, some I don't know, some code you have, etc., etc. And this is something that will also need to be replaced when you go to Zoneless. And for this, the team introduced two different, two closely related APIs called after next render and after render. So the name is probably not that important today, but because we know that we want to update them, because they're not that clear. For example, number of people have been asking, after render, is it once? Is it multiple time, etc.? So it's probably something that will be updated. But basic idea is, here we have two cases. Either it's something that's called once, or either it's something that's called every time your component re-renders. And these are the two methods you will be able to give a callback to do some DOM operations. And these are called by the framework, the callback invoked by the framework, when the rendering is finished, and you know that you will be able to do some DOM operations. And when I say DOM operations, it's either reading the DOM or writing to the DOM, for example. And these two methods are compatible with zoneless applications. And this is one of the recommendations. If in your code you have something that looks like ngZone unstable and doing something like some DOM operations, you will probably want to use these two functions. But there is also something that has been introduced, also an experimental. It's a new service called PendingTask. It's a new global service that will handle that will help the framework know when something is happening under the hood. For example, every time you do HTTP requests using the HTTP client, or every time you have some effects pending on some dirty signals, the framework will stay unstable using the PendingTask service. So this is done under the hood. It's done automatically for you. So every time you do either one of them, the application will stay unstable. But imagine you want to do something on your end. For example, you have some other APIs that are asynchronous, and you want to tell, okay, I want to tell Angular, I am not ready. I am doing some work that needs to maintain the app as unstable. Typically, if you are on server-side rendering and you want to do some async operations that are not HTTP or not effects, you want to tell, okay, please wait until I'll tell you so that my task is done. So here, Like I said, it's an experimental API. It's called experimental pending task. So you inject it, then you can just create an ad. It will just create a task for you. And when the task is done, you can just clean up the task, the pending task, with calling the function that has been returned by the ad. This is the first API, and we should probably land this one until Wednesday, I think. A second one that is just a more simpler way to do the first one, just saying, okay, run this function. If it's async, you can do an await on it. And when it's done, okay, the framework will know that the task is no longer pending. So here we have a public function, experimental, that will help you tell Angular that you are waiting for something and the framework should stay unstable. Still, same service under the hood, a new RxJS interrupt operator, pendenting event. It will, if you create some RxJS observable, and it will take some time until the observable sends an event, your app will remain unstable. So different possibilities to tell Angular you are waiting for something.
Sorry, I put that last, the last position of the chain.
It should be at the last. It means that once it receives the first event, it will go stable. I mean, the task will be removed from it's like a task array until this array is not empty. The framework will stay unstable. You will see this in the doc. It's currently in, I think this one is still in PR, but we should land it very, very soon. So. A question I've seen a lot of times already when Zoneless was released as an experimental feature. Do I still need unpush with Zoneless? Do I have an idea? Yes or no? No idea. Yes. Yeah. Do you still need? Of course, the question is yes, because you're not asking the same question actually. Zoneless and unpush is like a question of when and what. When you go zoneless, when you do a zoneless, we create a zoneless application. Zoneless is about when are you checking, when should your application schedule change detection. So on which event, how does the framework know when the components are being checked? Unpush is more like you have your tree with all the components, and with unpush, you are basically telling, I will only check the children if I'm dirty, if my data has been dirty. So when you're doing unpush, you're saying, okay, should my component be checked or not? So it's more a which component, what component should be checked. Whereas with Zoneless, it's about when should I check my whole tree. So the question is, do you still need Zoneless? Do you still need unpush with Zoneless? And the answer is yes. And you probably want to have unpush on every component, so you have the best performance for your components. This is basically it for me. Quick presentation of Zoneless. I think I can take, because I've been quite fast, some question around this. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer that.